this press conference. The last time I was here, one reporter asked me when would there be a finance minister, and I assured her that long before the end of the year we will have a minister with the responsibility for finance in the office of the president. And so yesterday we were pleased that Dr. Ashni Singh took up that portfolio. This would allow the oversight from the office of the president over the finance sector and the oil and gas sector to continue, but would allow us to focus on more strategic issues and issues that are transformative in nature and that would have a more medium, long-term benefit to people, rather than be bogged down on a daily basis with the routine functioning of a particular ministry. So I'm extremely pleased that Dr. Singh is there, which would allow us to have a broader view and a clearer implementation of the vision of the government. Now, I've also been bombarded with interviews, with requests for interviews about the upcoming 100 days in office. And a lot of the reporters wanted to tape this very early. But I did not want to do several interviews, so I thought that I just share my perspective on the past 100 days. Well, it's a few days away from the 100 days. With you here today. And so I hope that when that event, because a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on 100 days in office, that you will understand that effectively it will be about 40 days, because we took over and we found ourselves in an unusual situation where there was no approved budget for the year, and you had tons of expenditure in excess of $200 billion of liabilities and spending that needed to be cleared, and no money really to run the government because there was no approved budget. And you would recall that we passed the budget, but that the appropriation bill was only approved on the 30th of September. And that effectively gave us a government, a fully functioning government, only for the month of October and a few days in November, because prior to that, we did not have the powers to spend. We had to go with the 112 provision. And so a lot of the ideas we had, programs that we had already worked on, simply could not be implemented because of a lack of funding. So when a lot of people talk 100 days, it's effectively only about a month where we've had resources to start implementing the new program. Secondly, we took over in the middle of a pandemic, a global pandemic. And that was devastating many countries. The pandemic was devastating many countries. And we found ourselves in Guyana totally unprepared to tackle what we knew was going to be an escalation once you start returning to normalcy. Because in the initial months, there was a total lockdown of the country. And so that kept the rates low. And in that period, there was very little testing done, so we did not know the true nature of the infection, the real rate of infection. So we had to quickly address that situation. A government that didn't have budgetary resources for the most part of its life in office thus far, but had to try to address that situation through exceptional means. So I hope that all of these factors are looked at when you assess the performance of the government in the first 100 days in office. If you look and stand aside and look at issues apart from the routine functioning of government, because there are many issues that just have to be done. People have to be paid their wages, they have to procure drugs to the hospital, they have to help get pensions out, and all of these things. These are the routine functions of the government. But at the end of the day, they're not the things that move the system forward. And so we have had to quickly ensure that the routine functions of the government continued at a higher level of efficiency. And there's been a lot of changes in that regard to ensure that the machinery of government operated more efficiently, expeditiously, and with more care in terms of services that it provided. And so a lot of work has been done in that regard that may not be apparent to many, because they're work that of a routine nature and often not visible. And so that has happened in a major way across the entire government. We have been speaking with people in every department, every ministry, every region about reaching out, going back out, changing the way the APNU managed, which was an aloof type of management. The president hardly ever spoke to the media. He hardly ever would go out to the community to have a real discussion with people. It's just a PR visit to the community. And the ministers often just went in with large entourages and spent a ton of money without really addressing people's concerns. So you'd see a market shift in that the approach of the government from one with an aloof style of management to one that is very interactive, even in the middle of a pandemic where you have to be super cautious about bringing people together in large groups. But we have done that with utmost care. You've seen the ministers, and based on the direction of the president, go across the country in addressing various issues from housing to agriculture, drainage and irrigation, pensions, all sorts of issues are brought up at the community meetings. So it is not just making the routine function of the government more effective, more caring, but is also changing the approach of the government to one that is more interactive. That has happened in this short space of time, and I'm sure that the country would be appreciative of that because of the nature of the period in which we are operating with the pandemic ravaging the world and the risk of being infected. So people, even the ministers and many others who come out to meet them, they constantly put themselves at risk. They put themselves at risk, but they have to live too. And on the other hand, the ministers and others have to work. And so they recognize that risk, but they have real issues. And that is why people will brave that rather than sit in their home and come out to raise an issue. And so that's the next thing that often people don't look at when they assess the governments, because the approach of the government, but there has been a remarkable change in that regard of being more accountable and people-oriented and interactive. The third set of issues that we're focused on are issues that are more behind the scene, but are critical to the delivery of promises, jobs, prosperity to our people. And they deal with a whole range of activities that will stimulate the economy, breed energy into various initiatives that are crucial to people's well-being as well as their pockets or their income levels. And so today I want to, although it's just a few months, I'm just going to take you through a few of those things that you may be aware of already, but to see the large number and the activity level of the government, how intense it has been in the past a few days, basically, or two, 3 months. So if you look at the energy sector alone, which is critical, everyone understands that energy is critical, electricity is critical to growth and to people's welfare, the price of electricity. So we came in with a situation where after many years there was no investment in major baseload capacity. The government had paid for a unit, Wärtsilä, and using funds from the Treasury that were illegally approved because it happened in the period when the Minister of Finance had no authority to do so. The country didn't even know about this contract. So that was there for 46 megawatts of power, and they had not moved forward on the civil works. So we have had to work in the last 3 months to sort that out. Right now, there are 46 megawatts of power. The engine is here in the country, but it will have to sit and wait for several months, as much as 5 months, whilst the civil works is being done to accommodate the foundation work engine. There was no planning. And so a lot of work has had to go into that to sort out the pieces. Then we discovered that there is not enough power in the system, because when you take aside some of the units for maintenance, you're left with a capacity that almost mirrors peak demand. And so in the last couple of months, the government has had to buy, and now is from Giftland, about 5 megawatts of power that's coming into the system now for an emergency basis, so we don't have blackouts between now and the time where the base load station comes on stream, sometime next year. And we have had to purchase another 10 megawatts of power through MacCorp, which will be here by the end of November for the Christmas season, and but those will be units that will be used, can then be deployed once the base load comes in, can be deployed across the country. That's for about $2.5 million US. So that is all to ensure we have emergency power as we approach Christmas and into the new year, pending the establishment of the major base load capacity, the 46 megawatts of power. Secondly, we have already started working on the gas to energy project. We've been defining the parameters. We've had several meetings with Exxon, and we have now, I think we're clearer on the parameters we want, between 2 to 250 megawatts of power, and enough gas to do that and to supply the entire country with cooking gas, LPG, in the project that will hopefully move to a project implementation stage soon, very soon, early next year. And we're hoping that we would have a 3 years time span for that. That will be a major difference to the system because of the price at which it will come in. So we are working aggressively on that. That is to bring in a huge baseload capacity at a lower price that would cause us to change the entire dynamic of electricity production and pricing. And then on the renewable energy side, we plan to restart, because there were lots of commitments made by APNU. You recall that they made the pledge in the Paris Agreement that 100% renewable by 2025, with absolutely no project to deliver on that promise, that pledge to the Paris Agreement. So we are already starting to look to resume AMILA. We've started reviewing the documents, etc., to chart a pathway to hydropower development back again, because hydropower is crucial given our capability, the capacity of the country, our abundant water resources. We believe that hydropower has an important part in our energy mix in the future. And apart from that, it is renewable and environment friendly. Also, we have had a serious review of almost all of the small systems that we've had. So in the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, we have approved contracts to do a hydropower at Komu. There were some reviews done there, so we had to look back at what was planned before, and that's 1.5 megawatts at Komu, and to rehabilitate Mokomoko, which would be another 0.7 of a megawatt. That gives you 2.2 megawatts of power. And then just approved last week, I think it was a one megawatt this is a solar farm, 1 megawatt. So we'd have about 2.2 megawatt of base capacity, and then another megawatt of solar, which would be a grid tie-in that would supply power only during the day, not with batteries. And considering the peak demand that Lethem now is in that area is about 1.1 megawatt, we'd have almost triple the capacity of what they have, all coming from renewable energy, which would allow a massive growth in the industrial estates and the industrial plan for that area, and also residential purposes. Similarly, in the Bartica area, what was approved recently last week is a project that will start very soon for 1.5 megawatts of solar farm for Bartica. And we're doing the same through another project that was there through the GGGI and UAE. They're moving to install about 0.5 megawatt of solar in Wakanam. We're now exploring funding for around a similar size capacity for Leg 1. Where there is some funding from Madia already, doing a solar farm at Madia. But these are smaller units that would help significantly to bring down the cost of the supply. They don't have batteries, so they run during the day. So they don't, you still have to run the fossil fuel systems in the evening, but it would extend the hours of service that people have in these communities, particularly during the day, until we put in units with batteries that can store power, their solar power. So this is just to give you a clear picture of all of this has been done. We've reviewed the entire energy mix of the country. We've started working on each of the large baseload systems. We have a clear vision of what we want in each of these isolated communities, and we've started implementing projects in this regard in these areas. There are other areas that APNU started in the Pacaraimos, in the mountains in Region 8. There's a project there that now has stalled, it's in trouble. So we may very well have to cancel that project and rework it because nothing has moved on it, a hydropower there. So that is how much work. APNU has never clearly defined an energy mix for the country and with great deal of clarity on where they want to go in the future. And we have had to do all of this in an extremely short period because that is what is required. We have to hit the ground running now. In terms of, so that's just on energy. And all of that has happened in the last couple of months. On the climate change side, we have had to review all of that, what's taken place. So you know you had the Department of Energy and of Environment and the Office of Climate Change. So I'm in the process of merging that and creating a Department of Environment and Climate Change because there has been a great deal of overlap. A lot of people working on projects in a very isolated way, almost in silos, without any order or any regard as to outcome. So there has not been a clearly defined goal of what we want to achieve. They had this green state economy, the green state strategy, but it was so loosely defined and without any project to give effect to it that many of the people I spoke with didn't even know how they fit in, their work fit into this. So we have already made it clear, the President has said the LCDS is going to be the overarching document that would guide our climate actions domestically, that we have to upscale the LCDS, not in terms of its strategic outcome, which was to find a pathway to prosperity, to growth and development that is non-polluting, a pathway different than the fossil fuel-driven pathway, but this must not compromise our people's ability to prosper, because some countries, believe that all the responsible actions must be taken in the developing world and at a cost to those countries, when in many parts of the developed world people have 3-4 vehicles and their per capita carbon output is 10 times that of ours, like 20 tons per capita. And then they still want us to have equal burden sharing. So we have to leave room for our people to grow and prosper, yet at the same time find ways to do this that is less carbon intensive. And that was the objective. It was almost a development strategy. So that was crucial, getting that strategy in place. And then secondly, getting a means of funding the strategy that doesn't put greater burden on our people and our budget and our treasury. Because since we are producing a global good, that we must find a way of ensuring that the world also pays for some of these services that we are providing, because there is a global good that we are providing. And therefore, that is why we've been in the forefront of advocacy historically for greater climate funds. Like I was part of the small committee set up by the UN Secretary General to look at how we can raise $100 billion a year for climate financing. That figure is, after that unit was set up, and we came up with that report. That is the figure that is often used in the UNFCCC negotiations, all the agreements, including the Paris Agreement. So we have to ensure that funds for adaptation and mitigation, that they flow to countries like ours. And already we've been part of this economic team in CARICOM. We're looking to look at, now we're working aggressively on debt restructuring and liquidity for some of the countries in the region. But the climate variable is becoming an important part of development planning, and also to access to also enhance liquidity in some of these countries, or funding for their initiatives. So it was important that that be done, because that was what the Green State didn't have. It didn't have any source of funding, unlike the one we had with Norway. So we have also written to Norway. We got a reply from Norway, and so we are looking to re-engage with Norway soon on the engagements that we have, that they, first of all, a review of the last program, and we're looking to negotiate a new program that will bring additional funding for the country and for initiatives. Now, you would recall that we had identified several areas for spending of the GRIF money, the money that we earned through the first agreement with Norway, including grants and loans to but mainly grants to help small business who were getting into environmentally less polluting activities, a Center for Biodiversity Studies, ICT for vulnerable communities, some adaptation spending, decarbonizing the energy sector, a whole range of projects. Unfortunately, many of those projects that were more people-focused didn't move forward. So the GRIF projects that we had left before were implemented by UNDP. As they implement, they get a fee for implementing them, the projects, or the FAO. Now we have reviewed, we've spent the last few months on reviewing those projects too, because they're stalled. And although we have had $17 million assigned to the telecommunication project, a fraction of the $4 million has been spent on that, but we don't believe that so far, a lot of the equipment is just sitting in a bond. So we have to now engage with swiftly to get these 200 hubs created in the hinterland areas. So we are doing a total review of all the GRIF projects, the telecommunication one, to restart it, especially with hinterland telecommunications. The Amerindian land titling was another GRIF project that has stalled. We're going to now resume work in this regard. And then the one with FAO implemented, we found some atrocious things, that money that we earned from Norway was being spent on hosting conventions. We hosted a convention here on desertification. You know, a lot of trips for the staff at Lands and Survey to travel around the world. without focusing on the things that really matter. So we are reorienting that project too. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that we just stood still, it seems, almost like 5 years. We just stood still as a country, and we have had to, in just a few short months, to re-engage in this area. So that is on what we are doing on the climate issues. We're creating a unit to play a more active role in the UNFCCC negotiations. We used to have a high profile there. We're resuming this work, and we're going to expand the LCDS into looking more at biodiversity, sale of ecosystem services, looking at water management, which is crucial. So all of these things are being planned for. We are already putting in the structure in place, and we intend to move this forward. So that's where we're heading in a short period, to give structure to our thoughts and create an efficient mechanism in this area, coordinated mechanism to address all climate-related and environment issues. Now, this doesn't include the EPA. The EPA has to be strengthened separately, because those deal with more issues involved in, permitting and noise pollution and other stuff. That the EPA is up for significant strengthening too, and especially since they'd have to look at the oil and gas companies more now. So this is what has happened on that area. On the oil and gas side, in the last couple of months, we have had, the first 6 weeks and making sure that we dealt with the PIARA license and the environmental permit. And we defied all the August 18 deadline because we said we had to have more time to review it. And if you've had a chance to look at the difference between the PIARA license, though it may not be perfect, and the environmental permit for PIARA, you will see that they were vastly different in the range of issues covered and the protection of national interests than the LISA 1 and LISA agreements, the two that were done for LISA 1 and 2. Now, in that regard, so that took up quite a bit of time. As I mentioned to you, we're working aggressively on the gas project and local content now. And then I don't want to go back through all the things we're planning for, because I'd mentioned them at the last press conference about all the promises that are in the manifesto about the Sovereign Wealth Fund and the new legislation, petroleum legislation, because we found severe deficiencies in our laws when we were in the middle of those negotiations. And about decriminalizing non-disclosure, all of those are being worked on. So these are being done aggressively. And then we've started a review of all of the companies that have licenses, now prospecting licenses. So we are looking at their obligations, because we intend to hold them firmly to the obligations that they have under these licenses. I think there was a bit of a lax engagement with them, and some of them sought and got addendums after addendums. So we've seen even for CGX, they got 2 addendums, one in 2017 and one in July of 2019. And so it seems as though people can shift their obligations into the future without major penalties by seeking out these addendum. So we are looking at that carefully to hold people to their obligations, their responsibility. our laws clearly define what they have to do and in what time frame. So that would allow us a greater understanding of the different companies that are operating and their obligations. We've sought to find out the ownership structures of these companies. So we have information on the ownership structures, and I'll share some of that with you today. We have it, ownership structures. Now what we do, we will find out later, because although we know the ownership structures by companies, that is how a particular engagement is made up. Say the Kiteshore block, what share of that block now in the new arrangement is owned by different companies. We still do not have information on the beneficial ownership of some of the companies, particularly the privately owned ones. The publicly traded companies are different. And so we will seek out at some point in time beneficial ownership of these companies, because we believe they're important for the transparency, and they're also important for tax purposes, for taxation purposes. So I've seen in the newspapers and some places where people said that, oh, these companies are incorporated in jurisdictions that are known for secrecy. But all of that, we'd have to pierce the veil in all of these areas to see what is going on, to see that there is no shenanigan in this regard, and that we know, the country knows, who are the beneficial owners of all of these properties, and they must pay their fair share of taxes too. Once you know that, then you would know whether they have tax obligations or not. So we will move into that frontier in the future as we get to understand the sector better. But that's how I see it. Also in the future, you've seen that through a court action, which the AG was also involved in, where we recognize that the permits for the LISA projects were given in contravention of the law, and they now have been rectified, and some will expire soon. And so as soon as these permits expire, the conditions of the Payara environmental permit would apply to renewal for permits in the LISA, the expired permits, environmental permits for the LISA projects. So this is important as we go forward, and those will also have fines, serious fines. We dealt with the issue of how the fines would be applied the last time. These would for the emissions and also for the loss of gas, the government share of the gas. So that has happened. All of this is going on. We are also reviewing, there have been some little hiccup, but we are reviewing the companies now that for the marketing of our oil. That review is taking place currently, and we've had to work aggressively with lands and surveys, the city council, etc., to issue the permits to many companies that are locally owned or significantly locally owned, who are supplying services to the oil companies. Some of them have been waiting and languishing for 2.5 years to get a simple building permit. Now, because some minister or somebody connected to the government wanted to get their hands on something, and they were just stalling a lot of these projects. So now, almost over $50 million of projects have been unlocked, and these will start soon because of the permits that were for the local companies that were cleared at this level. These are mainly building permits to construct facilities, etc., not directly gas related. These are, but like for expansion of shore-based facilities and all of that stuff. So this is in the oil and gas sector. You can see the amount of work that's being done here in this short period. There are things that on the COVID side, the response, you've heard a lot about this, but in the last 3 months or so, the key issues have been in trying to deal with both trying to reopen the economy, because there are a lot of people want this. We talk to people every day, not just the business owners, but workers, people who now ran out of money, who don't have a social safety net. They just need to get back to work. I've had a discussion with people who serve, in the restaurants and stuff, a lot of single parent women and stuff like that. They absolutely have to get back to work. And so that is why the reopening of the country, a bit gradually but carefully, the opening of the airport, the extension of the curfew, but we know that with that can come high rates of infection. So we know this, and that is why the capability has grown exponentially. It's still not perfect because nobody has a cure, but we have now more material from the drugs to deal with frontline drugs and all of that to deal with people. So the testing has gone up enormously to the capability. And then we have expanded the emergency rooms and the number of beds and all of that to make sure that we can deal with larger number of cases. Fortunately, that capacity, like some countries, when they had this spike, has not been overwhelmed, that we manage well within our capabilities, especially for emergency care. But even in those emergency rooms, the equipment necessary has been purchased, and we continue to make investments in this regard. We just had engagements with the IDB and the World Bank to reprogram a significant part of our funds to deal with COVID-related expenditure, building capability, but also assisting people. And then, of course, you know that the program has been rolled out to deliver the grant to people, and so far it's going extremely well. A lot of the regions have either been completed or nearing completion, and so soon like Region 4 and the others will start, because these are big regions. But it's going well so far. We've had a number of the pink forms where we'll have to review those after we give the core households, because some people where you have multiple households living in a single building would not all get the grant. We'd only give one right now, and that is for accountability purposes, so we can count each house and decide how many packages have to go. So if we go to a village and count the houses, and we say, we have 25 houses here, how come you gave out 35 packages? So it's a kind of accountability. But later, when we get through the bulk of the people, we can then go back in a very nuanced way and help those where you have multiple households. But that's going well too, and the feedback has been good. It's been helping people. It's a small sum of money, but it's been really helpful to some people. And this is a large-scale task to go to every home in the country, and especially at this time in the COVID. But this has been done. So there are lots of movement in this regard too. On the other hand, in addition to these things, because they're trying to move the system forward, you have seen already what I'm saying to you is not new, that a whole slew of things are being advertised in the newspapers, leaving out the routine projects, like projects to build more roads in the community and all of those. We're trying to implement the budget swiftly, but it came out late. So the routine budget we're pushing to implement it. But the bigger projects, the president himself has been looking at the housing sector, because we made some far-reaching promises. We're soon going to be looking at all of the proposals. We have an expression of interest now for people, for companies, finance companies to structure a bond. So that will come in shortly, and we'll make a decision on that. But that could bring $40–50 billion into housing development, and an aggressive low-income housing program, building houses. And all the people, we made it clear that all the people at Success who have, and other areas, who have legitimate demand, they're going to get help, including help to get a piece of land and a house. But they have to be patient and have to go through the process. Everyone will get assistance, because the program is an aggressive one to do that. And we have already, in this very short period, started working on that. You've seen also, the government was out for expression of interest for hotels. A large number of these proposals came in. That is being evaluated now, and I anticipate not all will go forward. Some are stronger than others on the financing side and the design and everything else. But once the review is done, I expect quite a few of these to move forward to a project stage that would create greater opportunities for people in the construction phase, later job creation, people to serve there, and then the expansion of the entire hospitality industry. The Gaisuko, we have set aside resources there, so we made it clear we are going to reopen these estates. That was a manifesto promise. We've set aside some resources to start working on the planning in this area. The planning process has gone very far. They're resuming some small activities. The challenges are enormous because of the neglect. So when we, APNU, for example, that Gaisuko used to take care of almost all the pumps in the villages that drain the villages. So when Gaisuko, for the last 2 or 3 years, has been starved of money, the big battle that was going on between NISIL and the ministry. So many of the pumps were neglected or not functioning. And so now you hit with the rainy season, we have to find emergency resources to fix the pumps, and lots of the canals that were used to be kept clear, the old channels to drain the Gaisuko's land, but since they're abandoned, many are now working. So they now have created a huge choke point. And that is why the rainfall is heavy now. It's unbelievable amounts of rain in short periods. The intensity has grown, and we'll see more of that with climate change. But the capability in the city council, they have not really spent money on civil works for several years now. Almost all the money they're collecting, they're spending on wages and salaries and some on garbage collection, a little on garbage collection, but no civil works too. So that's why you've seen so many choke points in the city. Some rainfall. We have to have a major program for raising the drains, for cleaning, doing concrete drains. This is something we mentioned in our manifesto, South Georgetown. Doing proper drainage, seeing the outfalls are clear, a large project to drain the city, because it's a very important area, not just that. But coming back to Gaisuko and what work has been done there, we have had several expressions of interest for almost all the estates of partnering with the government or some outright private sector involvement. So we are extremely pleased about this. And again, those expressions of interest would be evaluated to see if you can resume economic activities in many of these areas without having to go to the public purse. That will create back employment and dynamism in many of these communities that suffered from them. So you would see that, you know, that expressions of interest are out for bridge. President and others have been having discussion on Deepwater Harbor, shore base. So a ton of activities have been dealt with in this short period of time. All of these things are being done on a daily basis. And often they're of a planning nature and a fixing problem nature, so you don't see them visibly as you see more overt activities when we go out to the communities. But the engine room is working over time to make sure that we address a lot of these issues. Even the school, you know, the big challenge we have with school opening. Now, many parents want this, especially parents who don't have a means of, they don't have Wi-Fi at home, they don't have a computer because the kids can't interact. So it is like it's a nightmare. That's why their ministry did it. The government decided to do this too when people want it, but it has to be done cautiously and limited. I'm told that it's only 10% of the schools and 10% of the student population of the country, 4th, 5th, and 6th form. And that they have great deal of flexibility how it's managed at each school. And so as to keep our children and teachers safe, but at the same time not to have our fall back, our students fall back. You know, this is especially those who don't have other means of accessing the information and the tutoring that they can get online to. So this is something that we all have to work together to make succeed, not snipe from the sidelines like APNU is doing. In fact, this is something because it's important for parents, teachers, and everyone else. You know, ideally, we wouldn't have to do this, but how long are we going to keep their children from not getting, especially those who are poor, not getting the tutoring, etc.? So I thought I'd deal with just some of the things to give you an idea of what's going on in this regard, in the government, in various areas. I can go on to the other sectors about not just the routine things, about structural issues that are being worked on. And then there is a whole group of people working, quietly so, to review the criminality that took place in the last 5 years. And there has been a great deal of criminality, and I see some of the criminals now, hardcore criminal types, some have become members of parliament, and some are now lecturing the country about, you know, decency, honesty, and about what is right. So when all their criminal acts are revealed, and this will happen, trust me, it's going to happen. It's just that we are not obsessing about it. We're not obsessing about it, and we're not going about it in a vindictive manner. And we want to make sure that we don't go after victims, that we want to go after the planners and the perpetrators of the large crimes, of transferal of state assets and theft of state assets. And so the government has had almost a benign attitude to people who were forewarned in that period, like on the East Coast lands, that they should not conclude deals with a government that had fallen through a no confidence motion, and especially after the elections were held, after the APNU lost the elections. But NISIL and the others, and there are several individuals in NISIL, and they would all be made to pay for what they did. They continued with the complicity of the Minister of Finance with the criminal actions. So people have an option now. Those who receive the land and are prepared to give it up with the large tracts of land where we said and we promised people that we will take back because they were done illegally. Those individuals have a pathway. They don't have to worry about criminal actions being taken against them. They don't have to worry that there's those individuals who voluntarily give back the land. And there have been several who have done this. They don't have to worry about anything. And they may even have a pathway once the government decides how the lands are utilized, some for housing, some for project development. They may have a pathway to getting back through a legitimate process some of the land once they go through a proper process. That is the approach here. But there are others who are refusing to do so, a few, and the guys, the architects, are not going to get away that easily. Because how could you, when the agreement has a payment schedule, not collect any money or a fraction of the payment schedule, and then transfer the land, vest the land into the, as title, give title as the ownership transfer without people fulfilling the obligations of the agreement of sale. That's criminal, purely criminal. That's a transfer of state property without payment being made. And all of these were done, the vesting orders were all in place after APNU lost the elections. So when the Minister of Finance was really no longer Minister of Finance. And so clearly there has to be an accountability for this. Contrast this with the frivolous nature of the charges against Brassington and Ashley Singh. You would see that they were acting pursuant to a cabinet decision. There was no cabinet decision in this regard. No cabinet. This didn't even go to cabinet. Under their when those things were sold under the PPP, they had to go from the privatization unit to the privatization board, which is made up of 3 non-governmental persons, and then from there a recommendation to the cabinet, and the cabinet approved it. In this case, it's just NISIL and the Minister of Finance. So they were charged and put in handcuffs for implementing a cabinet decision where you had even valuation of the assets. In this case, you had a transfer of state lands without no payment. So contrast that, and then Jordan tries to paint himself as a victim. And he was one of the most arrogant in talking about, the transfer of land to cronies, etc., under the PPP when he came into office. But clearly, this criminality is not just a normal level. It is something that you do when you think you're going to be there forever. Because who does this sort of thing? Would not even get the person to pay. You don't even pay, and you get the land transferred to you. Large tracts of 30 acres of land, state land, worth nearly $1 billion. And just hand them over the title to the land. So that is one area. And then look again at what happened. I think you've heard a lot from Nandalal too on this matter, because he's been dealing with a lot of these matters. They go to him as Attorney General. But look at, in the case of Mr. James Bond, his case, he was retained by NISIL as the lawyer to prepare the leases. And he removed the clauses from the leases that were standard clauses and that protected the interests of the government. And then in 3 or 4 cases, they set up front companies that he had some involvement with, which can be proven through paper trail. And those exact leases were concluded by NISIL with those companies. Most of the other leases have standard clauses that you can't flip the land, you can't do anything else. Then NISIL, the head of NISIL should have seen that. He was there to protect the interests, but he didn't. He signed those leases. Then these shell companies took the land from NISIL and rented them for, like, to others. And you've heard some of them got 20 acres and 15 acres and stuff. This is about nearly 55 acres of land in 3 cases for like $100 Guyana each. And money was paid behind the scenes. We have the money flowing into the bank account, like $1 million in one case, of the individual. So this is, I don't want to get into all the details, because this is not just money laundering, but it's defrauding of revenue. A whole range of things are wrong here. And this was a conspiracy. And there are lots of these at NISIL. This is just one case. So it is not just the Ogle lands, it's lands here. Then it is land over at Wales. Then it's some of the assets at Gaisuku. And then the lands and survey, we haven't even started touching that as yet. But for example, and it's unbelievable that how people would, the media seems almost to give these individuals a free pass. There's no kind of, particularly some who were always in the PVP, questioning about land issues, etc. APNU almost gets a free pass on all of these things, but we're not going to allow that to happen. They're not getting a free pass on the land issues, but from some elements in the media. So, lands and survey, the instrument appointing the head of lands and survey never gave him authority to give titles, lands of survey to individuals. He can't transfer title, give certificates of title. They only do leases. But yet titles have been provided. And so Mandela Avenue, the individuals are paid like the same plot. They put plots of land. One person paid $12 million for a plot of land. Another next door, a bank next door, pays for the same size, $151 million. And people like Jones and all of the others are part of this arrangement. And about In another case, Lands and Survey gave one individual 200 acres of land just at the back here by Ogle without even defining where the land is, just a lease, without saying where the land is, just that he has 200 acres of land. So nothing has been done with, so the review is taking place there too. But as I said before, we're not obsessing about this, but we're going through cautiously to see that we don't want all day long to be in court too with these individuals. So we just want to make sure that the key players face the music and that we move forward as a country and focus on the development agenda. And that is why, so you have a whole group of people who will deal with this issue. Let me just say clearly that the People's Progressive Party wants local government elections next year. We believe that we can do extremely well in local government elections, and we're going to be working really hard, COVID or not, to ensure that we improve the lives of people in their communities right across this country. And so the budget, next year's budget, will have resources to prepare for local government elections. Now, having said that, with the criminals, we have no confidence with criminals running the system. And so we're expecting that the commission will get rid of the criminals who they don't need any evidence. The whole country knows that these are criminal types who try to steal the elections and put this country through a trauma. Hardcore, criminal, in-your-face type of criminals. They cannot run any election. And I hope that the commission, the chair of the commission now has to fight against the criminals who are fighting to the chair of the elections commission, the same staff, to undermine the elections and the outcome. You know about the history of that. I'm worried. We intend to ask for the statements of poll. I'm pleased that Justice George said that the parties must have all the documents. So we need those documents to demonstrate that their own statements of poll in GCOM showed that the PPP won the elections and that Lowenfield and the others disappeared those statements of poll. So I'm very worried, and the chair should ensure that those statements of poll are safe, are in a safe place, if she could ever get hold of them, because the criminal types have them. But if they try to tamper with them now that the recount is done and we have our copies of the statements of poll, the same statements of poll, they will get into more trouble for fraud. But my worry is they will disappear the documents or cause them to disappear. But their own, those statements of poll will show that what the nature of what is happening. So we want local government elections. We want to win the local government elections. We want to make sure that the communities and people have a right to choose their leaders in the local areas. We're going to provide resources to prepare for local government elections, but any reasonable, sensible person, except another criminal, Joseph Harmon, he is the only one who would want a Lowenfield or Roxanne Myers or one of the others to be in charge of the process there. Nobody, none of the international community, none of the parties, except in APNU, that was complicit in the plot to rig the elections, have any confidence in them. And so there has to be changes there. That's what we want. Somehow that's being misinterpreted as the PPP doesn't want local government elections. That is being, and that is what, so they're talking about house-to-house registration. And clearly, with all of the lawyers in that camp, and in Roysdale Ford and the others, another bordering criminal type, and Roysdale Ford and the others, they clearly don't remember what happened. Lowenfield was moving to house to disenfranchise large numbers of people pursuant to an old order of Patterson. And we went to the court, and the Chief Justice ruled because they wanted to create a new register. And the Chief Justice ruled that you cannot remove people from the register now because they had migrated. Because in the Constitution, in the 1980 Constitution, you had 3 qualifications to vote or to be on the voters list in the Constitution: residency, Guyanese, and over 18 years. In the constitutional changes we made in the early 2000s, the word residency was removed. So you don't have to be resident to be on the register. There are two qualifying in the Constitution now, 2 qualifying criteria. You're Guyanese and over 18 years of age. So if you're Guyanese and over 18 years and you don't give up your citizenship when you go abroad, give up the Guyanese citizen, you can come back and vote once you're registered. That is what the ruling was. It was grounded in our Constitution. And this was understood once we went to continuous registration. Prior to that, we were doing the house-to-house registration, and every time you remove people. But one Guyanese abroad can now come and challenge if you remove their name from the list, and then the whole list would become flawed. So that was appealed, that decision of the Chief Justice was appealed, and I'm told that the Court of Appeal, I checked it only this morning, and I was told that the Court of Appeal upheld the Chief Justice's decision. So how could they now call for house-to-house registration to remove people that they claim who are abroad voted on election day, which is a lie, a total blatant lie, and would be exposed in the petition. And remember, we had nearly 700,000 people on their voters list. Only just over 400,000 voted. So, although you have the list there, a lot of people who are abroad never voted. And this is a feature of every Caribbean island or any part of the world where you have continuous registration. But this APNU had to find a reason for losing. They even threw their own polling agents under the bus who would sign the statements of poll. So I don't know where the leader of the opposition is talking about starting house-to-house registration now. If he has weak memory or he doesn't understand the constitutional hurdle that is presented there. So that is why you have to have clean people, and you have to have robust systems where you ensure only those eligible to vote can vote. But you can remove people who have died. You can remove them and clean the list, and we will support that. we will support removing all the people who are dead. We have to find a process. They don't even need to go to house. They can just get the death certificates from GRO and remove them, publish the names, give it to the parties, and then remove the names from the voters list and cleanse the list for dead people. And so these guys are just clearly not, they're just going back through a series of old rhetoric. So it's often very pathetic when I see them. The same Harman talks about Onej Waldron. Onej Waldron wasn't a politician. We should be happy that people who were not politicians come into government. She came in as a technocrat minister, a former magistrate, etc. And this guy, Harman, who squatted in parliament all these years, and had it not been them going to court for Charandas, would have continued to squat in parliament. He talks, and he didn't give up his own citizenship till maybe the end of November, end of 2019. He now is moralizing because Onej Waldron went earlier to the embassy, but only got her certificate a few days after she was sworn in. So, three days, and Onej Waldron did not sign a declaration form. That's the difference. All those who signed declaration forms committing illegal act that they didn't have citizenship. Harman and a few others signed the declaration form. Every person who contested on the list, Onej Waldron did not have to sign that because she was not on the list. So it wasn't that she committed any fraud, like people who knowingly sign a declaration and then they did that. So this is a pure nonsense. And Roysdale Ford, imagine him being the champion of honesty. You should watch the oil fuel smuggling and the sale of licenses at the gaming authority. But we're coming to that too. We're coming to that, and he is now talking about Onej Waldron, who would stand way above him in terms of integrity. So I don't know. The opposition seems to. I see Mr. Granger has now started village talk again. Today he has a village talk and all of that. Well, I wish him good luck, he and Harman, but clearly he could have talked much more when he was president and done much more. He did absolutely nothing, ran this country into aground, the economy aground, never focused on anything. And that is why I had to tell you about a lot of the things that are part of the rebooting exercise that we've had to deal with. So I think I'm going to end there and open the floor for questions now. Thank you. Yes. Yes, go on. You have a microphone? Yes, I am here.
Thomas from the Starbuck News. Just some quick questions. In passing, you had mentioned the Region 8 renewable cancellation, the project for renewables cancellation in Region 8. Which project is that, and why was it cancelled?
No, it's not. We are reviewing it now. It's at Cato, the Cato project, because it's not being implemented. They're in breach of the contractors, are serious breach.
Short. and Norway. When they would have replied, you said?
Yes, they
when you
replied.
anticipate discussions to start with them?
I don't know the exact date, but we'll reply, and so we'll keep the correspondence open, and probably sometime soon we'll do a first Zoom meeting.
It's just short. The hotel EOIs, why were the names of the companies not made public as is standard?
The thing is that a lot of these may never become real projects. It's not like you're assessing one against the other. If in this case let me give you why we had to go down this route. Because everyone was sending in a proposal to us. And everybody asked in to meet. And so we thought just to get all the proposals within a time frame within a defined period, to come to the government, so then you can analyze each and clear our desk of all of these proposals for hotel, and to work with those that are feasible. Then if we do that early, then we may have the benefit of the construction and early returns on them. So this was only a process to avoid people having to come one every week sending in. Remember, we have an incentive regime that will be a standard one. So like we give 10 years tax holidays. We normally would give the duty-free concessions on the building materials, etc. So they know what the incentive regime is. We probably work with people to, if the projects are really big, to work with them on land. You know how you give some preferential land, like the Marriott, well, that's owned by the government. But it happened with Ramada. Remember when World Cup cricket was there, they got the land and bodies, and they built. They paid near market value, but a little bit preferentially because you're getting the big project. So this is what happened. A lot of the people in there, of the proposals that we've seen coming through, I'm not sure that all of them will ever materialize as a hotel. And that it's the ones that you work with at the end. We will say we are working with 5 persons.
The question is on the private sector and private sector workers. Over the years, the public servants have received the bulk of benefits when it came to measures in the budget. Is there anything being looked at for private sector employees for this year, probably tax-free on bonuses, tax-free salaries for any months, anything to that effect?
No. Right now, to be honest, at this stage, no. But that doesn't mean that can't be looked at in the context of the budget, in the new budget. Because budget preparation is already for 2021. We've already started, at least conceptually, what we want to get done. So we are looking at 2021 already.
Good afternoon. Kimal King for Kaichor News. Mr. Vice President, could you say to what extent was the government satisfied when it approved the Payara project that the $9 billion estimated development cost was reasonable for the project?
So you would recall that that was one of the issues I mentioned at the press conference, that in the past we would get a block sum, a block figure, and it was hard to analyze the block figure. So we have now, Exxon has an obligation to provide disaggregated figures that will be examined whether they are reasonable or not. I'm told that when compared to LITSA, because people compare to LITSA, it's the same amount of production levels, that you have about over 30% more wells in Payara than in LITSA, and you also have more of the piping, longer distances to pipe the gas. Not the gas, but the oil. So this is a figure that is given. In the context of a license, I don't think you can immediately go through all the details of it, but there's still a process. Remember, we have to review all of their costs because this comes out of cost oil. So every bit of this cost will be reviewed, and if found unreasonable, and say we find something major that, look at this big escalation and that it's unreasonable, not competitive, then I don't think it can enter cost oil. We'd have a dispute. But right now, we made a case that we have to provide disaggregated figures, not just block figures, and we are pursuing. We have to review. I told you we're behind on the review because up to 2017 now they were working on of the cost, the pre-contract cost, but it's not just pre-contract costs that have to be reviewed. Every bit of expenditure that is made and that is funded from cost oil. And so I don't have any worry now that we missed an opportunity, because we'd have to hire the best skills in the world, not a Department of Energy, a couple of staff there to do this review. We have to hire some of the best accounting, auditing firms, etc., who have expertise in oil and gas sector to do this sort of work.
As for the traders of the crude, NPTAB has been a little resistant to requests to release the identities of the evaluators. Anti-corruption advocates have said that...
We don't have a problem with releasing the names of the people. We'll get the names to you shortly. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay. On the Kaisar and Kanji blocks, you've mentioned that you want to seek to find out the beneficial owners. I remember in opposition last year when Kaiser News had first raised this issue about the awards, you had spoken in support of an international independent investigation to determine whether there was any corrupt handling. So would you support that now?
Yeah, and even before that, I've asked for internal documents to be prepared to give us a great understanding of how the process of approval from within, that is the petroleum department. So they're working on briefs, giving me specific timelines as to when companies were incorporated, the names of the individual, and then we know when the licenses were approved. As I said before, I don't personally have an objection to any review, because I believe then and now that no corruption was involved, because I know the individuals. Ramatar, I believe it was the era when people were very liberal with the issuance of licenses because we had not found oil as yet. We're very liberal in that entire era, which we wouldn't do today, because after oil. Now, even after we found oil, Trotman signed an agreement, which is the same. This is after we found oil, almost a year later. He signed an agreement that has the same terms that the agreements that were signed by Ramatar have. And this was after oil was found. So I don't believe that. Now, if you ask my personal opinion about some of the individuals concerned, or particular individual, I have a different view. But I don't need to share my personal views.
Well, obviously, what you're doing right now, finding information, is you sort of just...
No, I want to make sure. I want to make sure that the media also gets proper information as to, from the Department of, the Petroleum Department, about their engagement. I want to see how long they had been engaged with these companies before the agreement, they got the license. Because if there was long-term engagement with them, there were not new engagement that happened suddenly. Because the capability of, Kaichor seems to be saying that these guys don't have capability. But that's one issue. But a lot of the companies that have capability to abroad, they also take the licenses and flip them. And these are the big companies. They may have the capability of an Exxon or a Total would buy into something, get a license, and then flip it, sell it. So although they have their capability, many of them don't develop the issue. So whether you have capability or not, that was never a requirement of the act, particularly in that period when you did not find oil. Now, if you ask me about now, that's a totally different situation that any new block given out would be, what people would have to face a whole range of questioning. And even with the transferal, I saw how liberal we were in allowing the transfer of property. So the transfer was done without questioning about tax obligations and all of that. So I want to know why in future the petroleum unit has to, if we're approving transfer of blocks or buy-in, farming in, etc., that we have to have much more information, and we have to ensure that people who are doing this, that they do it in a fashion that is transparent enough to allow their tax obligations to become apparent and not hidden or avoided.
We can talk all afternoon about your findings, what you're looking for now, but that would be based on a probe that you are doing of your own party.
But that's the first stage. I have to be satisfied. That is the first stage at this point in time. So that's the first one I have to do. I'm going in sequence to this. Then I have to also make sure that if you're listening to reason, I believe the newspaper and the reporters would listen to reason. So if I give you, and I can find reasonable explanations, then you may have a totally different picture of what's taking place there. That's the idea. So that is what we all want. And to find out if anybody took money for the transfer of these blocks, or whether it was something that they just did because it was the standard issue. First of all, I didn't find any breach of the law. So the issue is, was it corrupt? And that is the issue. Can we find a link? And that is why through beneficial ownership, can we find a link to any government official in this regard?
Okay, but do you see, finally, a conflict between a person being a principal of a contractor in the oil sector, as well as being a principal of a subcontractor that is benefiting from contracts?
I don't like to deal with hypotheticals. Can you tell me a bit more? Right. Can you tell me a bit more? Call the names if you want. We are all for transparency here.
There is a businessman named Glenn Lawachi. He is...
Who?
Glenn Lawachi. He is the corporate secretary for Mid-Atlantic. He also leads this company called Glass Holdings, which for which Mid-Atlantic is a client. Mid-Atlantic is one of the owners of the Cantu block.
Oh, that is the corrupt transaction with James Bond, where they bought the land, that glass or something, glass?
That glass, yes.
That glass, no, that, they have to find him, that guy, the Chinese guy. He's not Chinese? No, they said he is in China. I'm told by Nandalal that he has to come and say how he got the land, because that was one of the transfers that took place. And so that's on our radar, if that's the one that you're talking about.
The issue now is
Okay.
whether he is a principal in Mid-Atlantic, and he is also a principal in Glass Holdings, which has Mid-Atlantic as a client.
Yes, yeah, that's it. So the link, it seems as though Mid-Atlantic was involved in this unhealthy transaction, illegal transaction. It seems as though they were involved in it with James Bond in this. I have no apology to make for that. So I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's on our radar. I didn't want to mention it too early. We're looking into it carefully. They told me, Anil said to me, he's in China. Okay, all right. Well, give me the address. All right.
Vice President Jagdeo, Guyanese critic for Daybreak News. From your earlier statements and previous press conferences, what you have outlined, what the PPP has done so far, will basically add up to have outdone the previous administration. You've done that in 3 months, what they haven't done in 5 years, and trying to rectify also. The question today, they have done significantly well as it relates to drugs. We have just found out that a drug shipment that is said to have come out of Guyana, one of the biggest drug shipments ever, has been found in Belgium. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, we're trying. I saw Demerara Wave said the ship sailed in October, end October, but I think that might have been I don't think it's in October, because if it's in October, it wouldn't be in Belgium. I think from what I'm told, it's in August, sometime in August. So let me make it clear. We have met with all of the agencies, including the US and the DEA. We're working closely with the DEA to ensure that Guyana, any transshipment of drugs through Guyana, any transshipment, and building the capability for doing that. Any transshipment is we want to catch. So one of the assessments done and spoken to me about, especially this was something that the ambassador raised directly with me, is the scanners. The scanners at the wharf were not functioning for a long time. I think we got a donation from China. Now 2, in a matter of maybe a month ago or so, are now located there. So the scanners were not functioning. I don't know how many other shipments went through and were never intercepted. But we're glad that it's intercepted, and we will go after, we have to now go after all those people. Go back and find all of those people who are involved, including from what I'm told, but I don't know if if it's factual, because I got this report that the container might have been flagged. Don't hold me to this. Might have been flagged for inspection, and it was never inspected. So this is what I'm hearing. So it seems as though there was heavy local involvement, and we intend to get to the bottom of it. And we're working closely with the USDA.
Secondly, Vice President, you more than anybody else know about what you called, while being opposition leader, witch hunting. many accusations were made out against the former members of the former PPP administration. It so happens nothing came out of that. Allegations are being made against members of the coalition government. Can you give Guyanese citizens, because in your utterances you're saying criminal, and most Guyanese citizens, when they reach the stage that they're accused of criminality, they go to prison. Can you safely give Guyanese citizen assurances that they are politicians from the coalition? And if you could help me out, if possible, are they MPs that will be going to prison?
Well, I can't say. We don't sentence people. We can't. We're not the judiciary, the magistracy. And so, but I can assure you that criminal action, they will have to pay for what they did, and that it, first of all, will expose what we consider criminality. That is blatant transferal of state assets in contravention of the laws of our country. The first thing is to expose it in the public domain. So APNU supporters as well as PPP supporters can see this. They can contrast what they did with the claims of our level. They remember Pradoville too, and all of that. They can contrast the two and see what is criminal, including APNU supporters. They will be shocked when they see this. That's the first thing, exposing. The second thing is ensuring that an independent, objective investigation is concluded, not politically steered or fabricated, not the minister calling to say, go after this guy, charge him at any cost. That it is evidence-based and the charges are placed, and the charges have a great chance of succeeding in court. Then we'd find, hopefully, we'd get good police prosecutors, and the rest is up to the judiciary on the magistracy. But at least the country will see. So that is what we're committing to. But for me personally, what I've seen, this is criminal. That's why I'm using this word. Criminal, purely criminal. Who transfers hundreds of $1 billion worth of land? And that is, with no valuation there, it could even be higher, $1 billion, without the people even paying. They pay $2 million and give them the title, the ownership document. Who does that? Well, we had a Minister of Finance who did that. And so this is what is considered criminal, in my view.
Are you happy with the handling of the investigation into the Henry case?
The case, which case? The Henry case? I personally have not been fully engaged with this matter. I have to trust our police capability, our force. So we made sure at the political level that we said to them, the Ghana Police Force, which is the authorized body in our country to deal with law and order and to catch the criminals, that we want the perpetrators caught for this horrible, horrible killing of these kids. Okay. And therefore, that was our direction. Further, to bolster this, we also approached the CARICOM, and we ensure, and we got the RSS. They came in with greater capability. They have practically said that they look at the police, what they did everything. Now, I seen Mr. Nigel Hughes, as per usual, and now he he's talking about bringing Argentinians. If Mr. Hughes wants to, we're not sure that will make a difference. But if Mr. Hughes, but personally, this is not a position of the government as yet because I didn't discuss it. But if Mr. Hughes and the GHRA, the Ghana Human Rights Association, they want to bring the Argentinians to review and to see if they can help us catch these criminals, I don't see why we shouldn't allow them to bring them. I don't see why we shouldn't. We should. We want to catch all of these criminals and ensure that they get locked away for a very, very long time.
My second question is, are there any updates on the Guyana Public Service Union's negotiations?
No, I don't have any update on that. Yes.
Reasoning behind government's decision to allow some of the beneficiaries of the lands to simply relinquish the lands and get off scot-free, given the sequence of events that we had, no confidence motion, the CCJ ruling, the fact that elections had already completed, and these persons and some companies still collected the lands in their names without paying. Why has the government decided to take this route?
Well, first of all, a lot of them said they never asked for the title to be transferred to them. So this guy, like one person has been very public in this regard, said, I never requested. I didn't pay the money. That's why I didn't pay. So he unilaterally just transferred the title to them. I think there was a hope that they'll get away with this or collect some money from the people or something like that. I don't know what madness would cause this to happen.
This is why you refer to some as victims.
Huh?
This is why you refer to some of these people as victims?
As victims. In this regard, but they all knew we were saying this, don't engage. So they're not like totally blame-free, but I don't think people who are prepared to relinquish their land, although they have the title, we go after them criminally. Because they are prepared to return the state's asset, recognizing they didn't really pay for it.
Okay, my second question is regarding the commitment we made at the Paris for the 2025 renewable energy, 100% renewable energy. Are there any penalties for not making this commitment in time? I mean, you basically said that the previous government said
there is no penalty.
There's no.
Unfortunately, that is one of the weaknesses of the Paris Agreement, is that countries make pledges, but there is no penalty for not fulfilling the pledges. So my argument when we, at the G77, when we hosted that event, and that was one event that we put together swiftly. The president said, I want this event, and we did it because we would have gone through the entire year as chair of G77 without having a flagship event. And although we couldn't do it as a negotiated one with the G77, you saw the extensive participation of the G77. So at least we have a communique emerging out of that. But we managed to put that together swiftly. And APNU were doing nothing. They wasted the whole year practically there. So the point I was making is about the pledges were not even enough to get to or to allow us to meet the target, which is a maximum of a 2 degrees rise above pre-industrial level. The OASIS countries want 1.5, so the target is lower than 2. And the pledges made by all the country were not adequate to achieve that. And now we had even the pledges that were made have not been fulfilled. So it means a greater deviation from achieving the targets. And then when you look at COVID now coming along, and a lot of countries having to switch, their economies are in deep trouble. So they don't have money to fund the mitigation measures, necessary to accomplish their pledges. That means we're in major trouble, because we're going to head, if all things being equal, we're now targeting a 3.5 degrees rise in global temperature above pre-industrial level, which will have catastrophic consequences for many, many countries, and will have issues on a whole range of people's lifestyle, the kind of crops we grow, these adverse weather events and all kinds of stuff. So the idea now is we're going to work to rebuild that coalition aggressively to ensure that the next COP moves people to keep their pledges, and now for the developing world to try to find resources to link the resources, available resources, to the implementation of their pledges. And that is what we're working on now internally to do that. We had a great profile in the global environmental community, Guyana. We are a small country, but people used to turn to us for leadership and advocacy and stuff. We lost that over the years. We're trying to rebuild that. With a team of good, dedicated people, we'll be able to do it.
Okay, my final question has to do with something that I'm finding a little mixed up with the Wartsila units. You said that the units will now have to sit and wait a few months approximately until civil works are executed before it can mesh.
Yeah.
But the government, former Minister Patterson and I think the people at GPL had said that they ordered it at the time they did because it was emergency. So I'm getting a mix-up between it being an emergency.
That is the problem, the issue we said, that you can't classify. The Constitution allows, and this is stretching the Constitution, would allow you to move away from the 112 provision, because our FMEA says you use 112 of the previous year's expenditure and only on the recurrent side. So for the first 3 months of the year until you have the budget, because the fiscal year comes to an end, and then you have 3 months grace to use that provision. Now we turn a blind eye in the PPP because you had to have people, public servants, being paid. We couldn't shut down the government. So you notice I did not criticize Jordan for the payment of public servants or the running of our hospitals and schools, etc., because although it's not perfectly legal, we had to get that done out of necessity. And so we didn't criticize that. So there were even some COVID-related expenses that we didn't criticize. But the hospital was one that is not an emergency. And they spent a ton of money. We are critical of that. That's illegal too, what they did on the capital side. He didn't have the authority to release capital money to start new projects, just to fund rollover. And then on the GPL, to make this 10 billion loan to GPL, first time we're making a loan to GPL, and two, use a provision of the Constitution to say that you may, in the period after elections, you may use money to maintain public service. That's not maintenance of public service, nor was it an emergency. Was not an emergency. He argued it's an emergency. They needed emergency power. So you yourself would see, it was never emergency. They bought the unit.
But were any inaccuracies found with the money that was actually paid for the units? Any inaccuracies found with the money?
No. So far, I don't know if we have a bit of it sitting in an escrow at the central bank. Not all of it has been paid over as yet. But I don't think there was any fraud in utilizing in the payments. I don't know, I'm not sure as yet, but he illegally did it. And I'm wondering if people got a kickback on the purchase. That is why they rushed to do it when it was not an emergency, in the period when it was illegal to disburse funds. And somebody might have pulled down money. Like we are now reviewing 3 big contracts that are given all to one company, the same Chinese company, in 3 cases, 2 IDB funded and 1 by the Islamic Development Bank, where their bids were like 5 million US above the next closest bid, and the locals were kicked out. Well, we're reviewing that too in GPL. There were lots of criminalities that took place there too, especially when there was no board and they had to go directly to the minister. And we want to see how the $20-odd billion that they had accumulated after the oil prices fell in 2015. The oil prices collapsed from $120 a barrel to like $30 a barrel. And so they didn't adjust the electricity prices, but they accumulated a big surplus. We're examining now where did the surplus go. And then on the 8 locations in the hinterland where we supply fuel or manage electricity, they ran up some huge liabilities that we are taking account of now, because like Linden and Kwakwani and all these places, massive liabilities they ran up there too that are outstanding. So it's in a mess there. I didn't mention that, but because I done that early about what we took over to, if we are examining the 3 months, the 100 days, you have to look at what we had to do at GFC. GFC was bankrupt. We couldn't pay wages. We had to make money available to them. So a lot of that has happened too, cleaning up of a lot of the state agencies.
Sarah Keano, Kaiser News, good afternoon. I just want to ask a few things first, starting with a follow-up on the pre-contract costs. You said that we're now examining, well, the PPP government is now at the stage of examining the 2017 costs?
No. I had explained before that APNO, the Department of Energy, said to me that they have a person now reviewing the pre-contract costs up to 2017. We have not gotten around to that as yet, but we will ensure that every cent from the beginning to Payara, all of it has to be reviewed.
So my follow-up is, according to the contract, up to 2015 is about $460 million US. Could you say what's the total up to 2017?
Well, I can't tell you now, but if you look at what has to be reviewed, if you're spending $9 billion for Payara and 6 and 3, you're talking about 20-something billion dollars. Those are small sums you're talking about, the pre-contract costs. But those are not only the costs that have to be reviewed. The post-contract costs are the bulk of it. So whilst we're talking about pre-contract costs, the big bulk of it is the post-contract costs. So we're talking upwards of $20 billion that have to be reviewed.
Okay, I was just trying to get an idea of the cost between 2015, because there've been a lot of estimates.
It's a task that we have to come around to, but I'm just saying to you that it's not that we're dropping the ball on it, is we have to examine it, because that's looking out for national interests. And in there, if we find the bloat, like a lot of people are saying, oh, these development costs are bloated, then if you have people who can review these and say, no, this is not accurate, then they can't be taken out of cost oil. So then you have more money remaining to go to profit oil.
Okay. On the issue of beneficial ownership, Guyana is a candidate member of the EITI, and it is set a 2020 deadline. Do you think a 2020 deadline for the disclosure of beneficial owners?
And I said that before, we are examining that. Huh?
2020 deadline.
I'm not sure we can meet it, but we are going to examine it. 2020, we have 2 months. We have 2 months more. I think we can, yeah.
Okay, now,
Just want to turn your attention
At
to
least this is oil and
CGX.
gas.
Yes.
To do the entire mining sector would be problematic because a lot of the local people and stuff like that. But our first priority is oil and gas. We want to deal with the oil and gas sector. Make sure you have full transparency there, all the beneficial owners.
thank you for that.
No, I just like to turn your attention to CGX, which you spoke about, the work program. One was amended in July 2019. Are you examining the work programs to ascertain whether it was watered down during that time?
This is something that I saw the amendment, and even with the amendment, they have obligations they have not fulfilled. So we have to have a discussion as to why they didn't fulfill the obligations. But that is a suspicion of mine, but I can't verify it. I just saw the amendments, what took place. And then I saw the first renewal period and the second renewal period. So that was my brief, was a generic brief, but I'd examine that carefully.
Okay, and finally,
We had taken an IDB loan to improve our capacity in governing the oil and gas sector, and one of the conditions was the creation of a depletion policy. Could you say where is this mechanism? It stands for the PPP's plan?
I don't know about that was with the conditionality for those loans. I've expressed concerns to the World Bank at least, and I intend to with the IDB about these loans and how we utilize them and how we contract consultants. You know about that issue being a concern of ours, and that sometimes we need, if you go through a totally competitive process that they determine, the people who outcompete the ones who are more, for want of a better word, attuned to the interests of the developing country, the client states. They often have better CVs, and then they rank higher. But that doesn't mean that they will look out as much for your interests. For people who have CVs who might be, they still have great experience in the sector, but their CVs are not so prominent, but they have your interests. They're more like you could find a Guyanese, who might be a solid gas to energy project export. But if we go through a competitive process, we might find a guy who has worked, from another country, who has more experience, but he has worked for 2 oil companies before. And so who do you choose? And if you go through that competitive process, you have to choose the best qualified person. But he may not look out for interest. So this is an internal issue we are discussing now about, and it's an agonizing issue, because ideally you should go for the best qualified person. But if they're not going to look out for your country's interests, then why do you have them there? So this is something we have to find a solution to it.
but until the time that
You're looking at that. The reason why I asked about the depletion policy is because it was recommended.
Yes, but if it is a condition of the loan, I'd have to examine it again. It's new to me.
No, I'm off
Of that now,
Oh,
asking
okay.
about it being the condition. I'm speaking about the mechanism
itself.
which gives Guyana time to put a pause on the aggressive development and develop your capacity to govern.
Okay, but no, we're not pausing development. As I said before, we make it clear from the beginning. We have a window. I saw I think it's the International Energy Agency, put out this report which says that even with an aggressive move on renewable energy, you would still need about 40-something percent, 45, 46% of fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. But remember, we are in a competitive world, although we are low-cost producer. So we have a window in which we have to maximize our production and utilize this production and the resources therefrom to develop our country and our people. And we want to accelerate the production at that level. We're not pausing it. But the capacity has to grow in an aggressive fashion simultaneously, the capacity. This is not sequentially. We don't have 100 years to develop capacity. By the time we develop capacity, they find one breakthrough technology and you can't produce the oil. And some country comes up with something. So we are making it clear they're running simultaneously, development and capacity building. But you have to increase the level of capacity, or you have to increase the pace of capacity building. And we're coming to that. I already mentioned about this aggressive training of our people, which will have to be, Exxon and the others have to spend more than $300,000 a year on training our people. We are expecting significant sums of money to train a whole group of Guyanese to manage this sector, young Guyanese particularly. So they are all skilled to take over the bureaucracy for managing the sector in the next 30, 40 years or so. Well, not 30 to take over, but to manage it for the next years into the future. Yes.
Yes. Sir, could you say how government intends to approach the status of Ms. Onij Waldron, given the fact that the records are showing that she took the oaths while she was still an American? And secondly, what is the status of Dr. Mark Bino in the energy structure of the government? And has government decided on what it will do with Dr. Vincent Adams? And lastly, sir, with respect to the killing of the Henry Cousins and Harish Singh, why wouldn't government want to go the extra mile and fund the team to come from Argentina and I think Spain to use their technologies to see how best they can assist in solving the crime?
I just expressed an opinion on that, but I thought the GHRA has funding for this. So they should, I'm sure they can bring the team in. If we set precedents of this nature, then every person we brought in a CARICOM team, and every person will bring in their own persons. But we don't have an objection because there's nothing to hide. So I don't know why. I thought they had the funding. They approached Argentina, and why Argentina? Why not the United States? I think the United States might be even more advanced than Argentina or Brazil or wherever else. So we don't have an objection to Argentinians looking at it. I'm sure that we'll do it, but I don't know whether there can be about the funding. As I said before, this is not something I'm dealing with. So maybe you should ask the minister more about this, and he could probably give you a more nuanced answer to the questions. I've dealt with the Onij Waldron thing. I think it's a storm in a teacup, and I explained why already. And Mr. Vincent Adams is still off the job. We're looking to see in the new architecture that we're creating for the managing the energy sector, whether his skills can be utilized there. Dr. Bino is still there, but I'm not sure whether, and I'll be frank with you, whether he will remain the head, given that he never, his experience has never been in that sector. he is, I can't say that as yet, whether he will be retained in the area, because his entire experience is in environment, entire working experience being in that sector. I dealt with it already. Why? I explained why too. Yes, and I dealt with that too. Yes, and I dealt with that. I said that she approached the Americans prior to that date, and secondly, so this is it. She never signed no declaration form. She didn't mislead the country. She, like every person did in the past, and then they were found to be illegal in the National Assembly when they signed that declaration form. And I said of Harman, of any person in the world, should be the last person to talk about this, because had it not been Charandas' issue, then it would have never left the National Assembly. And so all right, she received the certificate on 2 days later, but she's not an American citizen. She made a great sacrifice as a person who's not in politics, a person who came in as a technocrat, a great sacrifice to do this. And that is the big issue when we have the thieves over there transferring thousands of acres of people's land, and nobody pays attention to that on Age Waldron. 2 days, she got the certificate 2 days late. That is the big issue in the country now. And that's why I'm saying free pass for all of these. I don't hear much about Lowenfield and the others, all the thievery that's going on, the blatant theft there. The elections, he's now becoming a folk hero for the other side, a hustler. This is why. So that is why I say it's a storm in a teacup. Not you making it that, but the, yes.
The basis for my question is that she took the oath on the 4th of September, in writing, the 4th, but she sworn in the 1st.
That's why I'm saying she received the certificate after, but she had already signaled to them that she's renouncing. She's renouncing. So she got the certificate how many days later? 2 days later than the day she swore in? 2 or 3 days?
She got the certificate on the 8th, but she took the formal oath.
Yeah. Yeah, so 4 days later she got the certificate, but she had already approached in August.
But in terms of legality, that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
In terms of legality.
I wish you all were quoting the laws all the time when they were squatting in the parliament. They're up new for a long time. Yeah. Yeah. No, but
Because it's a matter of the legality. Would government consider swearing her over in terms of
no.
meeting?
Personally, I don't think the government should swear in on Age Waldron again. Right now, she is not an American citizen. She gave up her citizenship. She is properly in the National Assembly. People, that is on Age Waldron. We should be happy that people are prepared to do this. Half of them don't want to give up anything and to come in and serve. This is a non-politician. And this is the big issue at this time. That's the only issue they can find over there. And that's the big issue at this time for the country. When you just told me about the big transfer of money, large transfer of sums of money, tens of billions of dollars. And Roysdale Ford, about everybody knows it's an open secret in this country, he was smuggling fuel. Open secret. And he is the one who's talking about on-age Waldron. And the preferences he got at the GRA. So we have to defend decent people who are trying to work. All right, she got her certificate 3 days after. It was not that she was lying and hiding. Look how long Harman was refusing to give his stuff. And he giving the clerk a deadline. He thinks he is still, I don't know, Minister of State, or when he wielded a lot of power. Look at the language. He gives the clerk a deadline. You better get me the certificate or you'll face consequences. This is the issue that I'm talking about. So I get worked up. It's not against you. I get worked up because of the individuals who are raising this issue and making it, the most worrisome thing in the country now. Onage Waldron got her certificate late. Okay. Yeah, yes. Is there anything on?
I just want to get some clarity on, you spoke about the rush to gas to shore. In a recent, actually August report, the IDB said that our Petroleum Act is not sufficiently prepared for downstream and midstream. So I want to know whether you intend to revise the legislation before gas goes downstream.
Okay, I mentioned that about the inadequacies of the Petroleum Act, and therefore that has to be modernized, to take account of all of that. Remember, this is a 3 years project. So definitely before the gas comes on shore, you're going to have a reform and catering for all of these issues. Definitely before.
Okay, 2 final questions. I asked you about the depletion policy. Am I to take that as you saying there will be no limiting of production?
No. You have to everything, and including in the Petroleum Act, that those things have to be examined at not just for individual companies. They have to be a matter of policy enshrined in our law. And that is how we should approach them. A matter.
You're saying that we have a short window. So will we not, will we allow them to produce as aggressively as possible?
It depends on what. That personally, yes, I would like to see us increase our production to the maximum level at this point in time, and the country, and change the nature, because change the nature of the contract too. You know, we talk about the Fukanji and Kaichor blocks, that they would have an entirely different production agreement that brings more benefits to our people, with ring fencing and all of that.
Okay, and finally, just for clarity, you are not committing to an independent investigation into Kanji and Kaichor?
No, at this stage, as I said, I'm not that I'm not committing. I'm saying this works sequentially. If I find any hint in this review that anything illegal was done, then yeah, that's fine.
But for now, you don't...
No, because we go sequentially. That's how I work. I work sequentially. I'm trying to find out. I could very well convince, I hope, the newspaper that carries all of these things, right? That maybe it is, as I said before, the conditions there. Because so far, what has been raised is a lot of speculation. Oh, did somebody get any money? Questions are being asked. But not a single shred of evidence has come forward from the international groups too, to say, and a lot of them came to Guyana too. Global Witness was here. Global Witness has a lot of reach and globally, and a shred of evidence to say that we can trace that there's been money or anything done illegally. And as I said before, I'm convinced from knowing Ramatar, etc., that there was no corruption, but the period was one where everybody could get a license because we didn't have oil. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Sir, just 2 questions. If possible, can you say how much Guyana is expected to save, or what is the aggregate benefit which would accrue from the revised energy mix? That's the first question. And secondly, I know Budget 2020 is considered an emergency budget. So can you say how soon government is looking to present Budget 2021?
We haven't determined a date for that as yet, the budget 2021, although I know conceptually we started working on it. What are the things we want done? And the other matter is that if you look at it from BOP, where it has great impact. It would run into hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of BOP impact, in terms of disposable income to the private sector and people and individuals too, would run into tens of millions of US dollars in greater disposable income because of cheaper electricity. So it would have multiple benefits. And to look at all of the, so from on the external side through the BOP, on the fiscal side, because a lot of areas where we're giving subsidies now, if they move to renewable energy and cheaper energy. So Linden now, the cost of the subsidy is nearly $2.something billion a year, running nearly $3 billion a year. If you have the price of power half of what it is, the subsidy cuts down by half just for Linden. In a place like, if you can get the entire LETM running on renewable energy, the money that we have to subsidize power generation in LETM now is saved. So it has a budgetary impact, a balance of payment impact, a welfare impact in terms of greater disposable income, and then a business impact because lower cost of production. So it's huge. That is why energy is so critical. Tackling it as a priority is so critical. Okay, thank you.